We have a couple of criminal lawyers that are doing exceptionally well just through organic social content. Well, I prefer using video with paid ads to kind of create this 24 by 7 system where I can be sitting there watching Netflix in the evening with my wife, and all of a sudden I've got a couple of book calls tomorrow.
For criminal defense lawyers specifically, would you say today the way to go is Meta over Google, or is it situation dependent? Okay, so I'm really glad to have Byron Trzeciak from PixelRush on the podcast right now. He's an amazing marketer and person overall, and has a lot of experience with law firms and running ads. So Byron, if you just give us a little intro and we can get rolling.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Andrew. Appreciate it. So I run a digital marketing agency called PixelRush. We specialize in law firms for a very long time now, pretty much advertising across the spectrum. Just recently, we've kind of moved from our traditional systems of Google Ads and SEO and pushed into a video-based marketing system, which is really built to track click all the way through to revenue. So kind of moving into the next phase of digital marketing these days where we want to get down to an understanding of how much does it cost to buy a client and how much is that worth to you, so that you can implement a repeatable system that allows you to buy your growth.
Awesome. Yeah, that's what I really noticed about your stuff these days is you're kind of focusing on the whole system, right? Like a lot of people are just like, we sell SEO, we sell ads. You're more focused on the whole system. And as a marketer to marketer, you can see when someone else is doing something that brings back the fundamental principles of marketing, kind of ignores all this noise. And maybe if you give us a little insight into the pieces that you do differently to other people. I think like what I spotted was the offer is really tight, the positioning, and then the overarching framework for how you get someone from a lead to a buyer.
Yeah. So I think for us, we kind of noticed at a certain point that we were doing a certain type of marketing for ourselves. So it was very outcome offer driven marketing. And we really weren't talking about the traditional things. We were trying to position ourselves unique in an ocean of one. And we felt like, hey, this is actually performing really, really well. But we're still offering all of these kind of traditional services to our clients. And that's where we really flipped the switch and said, well, what happens if we actually took this approach and started to apply it to our clients as well? And that's where we started to get a lot of really strong traction, and start to see some real insights, especially when it comes to law, which we're talking about today. Some big difference in terms of the costs, even with the system, that we're using today versus your traditional Google ads and SEO, which are, still good systems, but they do come with a premium and a price tag on them as well these days. And yeah, so we just saw some really key benefits there in terms of the cost to acquire, especially in personal injury, which is a big space for us. This new system was starting to generate revenue, and acquire clients at a cost that just made their traditional platforms look a little bit abnormal at that point. They started to question, like, well, hang on, we're actually spending way more on Google Ads right now, but it's actually generating us less, and the cost per client is far higher. So, yeah, really modern day marketing is starting to move, and I think you're seeing a lot of agencies move there, and a lot of law firms are going to move there as well. In that, just blindly spending these days on your marketing is not really the approach that you want to take. You want to start to strip that back and start to understand what's going in and what's actually coming out the other side, and what are my constraints throughout that system. Because essentially, if you don't measure it, then it's gut feel, and gut feel doesn't always scale that effectively. So we're trying to move out of that world.
So it sounds like the first step for you guys is to implement something where you can see possibly a CRM if they don't have one already, maybe they already do, but like a CRM where they can see, okay, this is what's coming in, these are the channels that work, this is what's not working, and then you kind of make the decisions about what to scale up, scale down. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. And it's, you know, I think any type of marketing can be quite emotional. I've also been very emotional along throughout certain periods in my own journey where, it's so easy to get distracted by a bright, shiny object and say, oh, I should go off and do this. We should add in this marketing. We should add in this. But a lot of the time, if you're actually tracking it, you can see that this area is actually performing incredibly well for us right now. This is the area that we should actually double down on, focus, spend more, be more aggressive on it, because that's the area that's actually performing quite well. But yeah, essentially, if you're not tracking to the depth of understanding what clients are coming out the other side of it, then you're really just optimizing around light, soft metrics these days, things like cost per lead, which can be a great liar in itself, especially for lawyers. Impressions, CTR, all of that. They're all soft metrics these days. They don't really paint the picture of, is this actually impacting my business and is this actually growing my law firm at the end of the day?
Yeah, for sure. Because in my experience, a lot of them already have a CRM. They're using Clio, they're using Lawmatic, something like that. And usually when we implement systems, it's a layer on top of that. So something like your Go High Level, where you have a secondary system, secondary dashboards and views. Do you give them the CRM, or do you use what they already have and kind of integrate what you're doing with them, or is it like a white label system where you build something?
Yeah. So it's a great question. So we're kind of using a combination of different tools. So we do use Go High Level, but what we find is that most law firms aren't going to switch from their own CRM platform and come and use ours in that same traditional sense. So a lot of the times, for lawyers that haven't got any sort of significant CRM, even just a basic spreadsheet we found is like everybody knows how to use a spreadsheet. Everybody can get into that ritual of logging in, seeing their leads, reaching out, contacting them, and so forth. But then we've built our own proprietary system that pulls in all that information from the spreadsheets and starts to really, um, report and analyze on that, and most importantly, show us where the biggest constraints are. So, for example, you know, um, you can often have conversations where the leads are not good, but once you identify the process on the client side, you might find the law firm took 48 hours to get in touch with that prospect. You know, um, We've seen some businesses where they have a really busy day of calls. They're supposed to send out proposals or offer sheets or whatever it looks like, retainers. They don't go out at the end of the day. So there's a lot of areas there where you can say, well, it's actually a good call. It was qualified. You had a good conversation, but then something here in this sales process didn't actually occur effectively. And so that's what our proprietary system does. It starts to take the inputs that they're providing to us, allowing us to analyze that and see where the constraints are in terms of being able to buy their growth.
Got you. And what are the biggest constraints you kind of see recurring? And like, if you were to give a law firm like three main areas, if I change XYZ overnight, this is gonna massively move the needle.
Yeah. So I think intake's a big one. I'm seeing it across the board, like even businesses that are, you know, say like 2 million in size. I think by the time they're getting to like 5 or 10 million in size, they're starting to have intake and some of these things sorted out. But certainly in that, like, you know, um, you know, less experience level. That's probably the wrong word, but essentially the lower revenue levels, we can see that sales is still a big part of it. So, is the lead coming in, and are you getting back to it at a fast rate? Everybody says within 5 minutes. If you can do that, fantastic. At least within a couple of hours is normally ideal. Um, uh, I think in terms of specificity, if I can get that out, in terms of your ads as well. So we're seeing like a world where trying to be more specific with your advertising and speak more directly to an ideal type of prospect is actually having a far greater impact than just going out and broadly advertising that, hey, you know, we're the number one criminal lawyer, for example, which everybody's saying out there. They're all saying the same message. So again, trying to appeal to your ideal prospect with specific messaging and a specific offer to get those ideal prospects leaning in. And as for a third one, probably just in terms of like trust as well. So many law firms and businesses, law firms particularly, can be quite awkward about asking for reviews for some reason. It's like a pride thing, and that we won't be asking for these items. But if you've got a 3.5 stars out of 5 or something on Google reviews, these are unknowingly hurting you and potentially holding you back from having more impact with your prospects. So, yeah, those would be the three areas that I would look at.
Yeah, so good, so good. So I love the term that you have, which is you can buy your growth. I think that's such a good string of words, right? And it does kind of work like that. If you have the right system, you dial in the intake, you're using the right ads, it can kind of feel like you're living on cloud nine because everything's just working, right? And you can see X goes in, Y comes out. That does usually take quite a bit of runway to make happen. You need to test different things. You need to try different creative. You need to build the system. You need to train the intake team. So what's the typical kind of timeline and how does that progress when you take someone on? Is it like the first 3 months are a bit ropey and then by the time you've dialed in intake, dialed in ads, things start to shift and when does that typically kind of occur?
Yeah, it's a great question, to be honest. And I again, typically we're working with cold leads via meta ads, and we found that a lot of people might have tried meta ads somewhere lightly and received a whole lot of spam leads. So there's almost like some intrepidation to go back into this. But my experience with paid, like with cold leads and paid meta ads, is that you can easily say that the leads are bad, but what it actually is more so is that the logic and the structure that you're applying to those calls and conversations in order to get somebody to take action. They're not coming through from a trusted source or a trusted pathway. And so, therefore, the approach that you need to take is very different. Because of that, even businesses in, say, that 1, 2, 3 million, they're going to sit there and say, hey, we're the world's greatest closer. Every lead that comes through, I close at 80%. And that is probably very true when it comes to referrals and word of mouth and those prospects that come through the door. But when it comes to like marketing leads, colder leads, leads that aren't as warm, that's where the process really has to change. And we find that a lot of our clients typically butcher their initial lead gen. So they really kind of struggle with those initial leads because their process actually needs to change and adjust to be able to deal with those. So I always explain cold leads more like, let's say somebody that's, smokes cigarettes, for example. You can get onto a call like this. We can speak for 30 minutes. I can tell you all of the negatives about smoking a cigarette, the impact on your lungs, whether you'll be available, to your family in 10 years' time. But if that person formally hasn't decided that, yes, based on what Byron said, I want to change my pathway here, then they'll just get off that call and say, well, that was a nice call. They'll go out in the backyard, they'll fire up a cigarette and they'll start smoking. And so, yeah, really, really, the way that clients have to deal with these prospects is more about getting agreement throughout it and getting them to sort of announce and say that, hey, yeah, this is true. I can't be in this position with my business. Something needs to change, or I can't be in this position with crime anymore, stealing cars every weekend. I need to change. I need to take action here and do something beneficial for my life. So
Of it. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me. And at the start you said you're focused on video. So is that
yeah.
we're also focused more on video, starting with assets that we then repurpose for ads and SEO. How are you using video right now?
Yeah. So we're primarily paid ads. We still do a little bit of organic for some of our clients, but we're purely around paid ads, which is probably what feeds into the buy your growth. Because we feel like if you have your system in place, you can essentially, scale from as little as 3K per month up to hundreds of thousands of dollars per month, and just by knowing your numbers. So we're really focused on that. I think that right now you do see a world where it's very hungry for content. You need to be feeding the content every single day, just as we're doing on this call. And I think that it can create a pattern of busyness for a lot of businesses, and the impact is not always necessarily high. So you've got high busyness and low impact. That's not the case for everybody, but it's certainly the case for a lot of people, even with like very large audiences where I've seen this happen. if you get to the holy ground with organic, I think that's an amazing spot to be, and like truly is one of the best places in business. If you have organic leads coming through, there's no cost associated with them other than the work that you've done today. That's a perfect place to be. But I think a lot of businesses struggle to get to that position. So I prefer using video with paid ads to kind of create this 24/7 system where I can be sitting there watching Netflix in the evening with my wife, and all of a sudden I've got a couple of book calls tomorrow that I get to come into the office, have those calls, follow my processes, and ideally get that business closed. So that's the kind of system that I like to implement for clients. Um, I still think video supporting outside of that. So I've had prospects jump on from an ad, jump onto a call and say, "Hey, Byron, I binged, 15 of your videos on your website or 15 of your videos on LinkedIn." And that's just such a great supporting factor where that prospect's even more pre-sold because of all the content that they've watched prior to jumping on that call.
Okay, good stuff. And so you're very focused on Meta right now as opposed to Google Ads. Because I remember when we first connected 10 years ago, to start with, you were the Google Ads guy. You spent millions or a million plus on Google, and you knew that when I worked with you, you knew the ins and outs of Google Ads. And it seems that there has been a big shift where now Meta is probably better for law firms today.
Mm. Yeah, I think I'll give some context around that. So we still do Google Ads and we still run it in the background. And for me, like I was probably one of the most passionate Google Ads guys out there. I would like to think that my skill set was pretty high, like compared to the average. A lot of weekends spent just tinkering around on Google Ads and trying to master and figure out all the different components to it. I think as the years have rolled on, say over the last 5 to 8 years, Google's continuously been adding in functionality that's really stripped away control from advertisers. You just don't have as much control anymore. Um, and again, it can still work and can still perform. But now I think now that AI's come in, we've got AI search. I know for me personally, I still use Google. I don't use it anywhere near as much as what I used to use it. And I think that it's under far more competition than it's ever had. Which, again, if we're talking about criminal law, if you're talking about lower levels of criminal law, say like traffic fines, um, you know, low level sort of criminal matters, you don't really have like a high ticket. Even 3 or 4K is not like a high ticket. And so, if you get 10 leads and, you're paying like $20 cost per click, and that's probably bare minimum, it really starts to add up in terms of your cost to acquire a client, starts to become, well over the actual margins and profits you have left. So, yeah, I feel like Google is very broad these days, has very high lead diversity, which is not always a good fit on the business side of things, and you're paying a very high cost to it. So in some ways, you're really looking for that whale client to come through, the one that nets you 50,000 or 70,000 or 100,000, and that's going to then pay for perhaps some of the months where you might have lost a little bit of money or it hasn't been as effective for you. Um, so yeah, I think it's definitely changed, and right now we're seeing with Meta that you can get a much cheaper cost per client. We're seeing people like Ryan Stewart in the US talking about that as well, where previously you'd say personal injury was one of the most competitive industry on the planet, and I think it is. But if you can pick up motor vehicle accidents for $1,500 in meta ads right now versus paying 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in Google ads, it's a pretty good place to be.
Yeah, good stuff. So, for criminal defense lawyers specifically, would you say today the way to go is Meta over Google, or is it situation dependent? Would you recommend smaller firms start with Meta and then gradually scale in as they grow?
Yeah. So I guess I'm seeing some variation. I think when you're talking about lawyers, I don't think that there's a one size fits all approach to the different areas of law. So, like family law would be different to criminal would be different to personal injury. They've all got their like subtle nuances that means that I don't feel I can personally take, this blueprint and apply to this and get the exact same result. Yeah, I think when it comes to criminal, we have a couple of criminal lawyers that are doing exceptionally well just through organic social content, like big followings. It's good content. It's very, it's easy to engage on. So I think organic content can still win. I think on lower ticket items, Google Ads is probably getting a little bit out of reach right now for that new law firm, or the traffic matters. The low hanging fruit, those ones, you generally need to be able to pick up a client at a cheaper rate than what you can with Google right now to make that profitable. But if you're talking more around domestic violence or sexual abuse or something like that, matters that could go for a much higher amount, then I still think Google, um, you know, can find prospects of that value, which make your investment into it still a worthwhile experience. So I don't think it's a black or white thing. You can't just say, "Hey, it's not going to be a good fit." But yeah, if you're generally in, say, like a 3 to 5K bucket for your pricing, Google Ads may not be the best fit for you right now.
So 3 to 5K is not the best fit. So you're saying, because it sounds like the economics of this, as with paid ads, it is a maths problem ultimately, but economics wise, you kind of need a higher ticket case value to compete with in Google Ads versus Meta.
Yeah. Correct. I think if you're doing it yourself, you've got a little bit more flex because you don't have an agency fee included in there. If you're doing it with an agency and they're stacking on top of that, well, then again, there's less flex in order to make those numbers work effectively for you. But yeah, if you look at kind of the cost per click that's coming out of Google Ads right now. And again, I'm in Australia. We're generally a smaller market with smaller search volume. If you're in the US or in the UK, you might find that some of these scenarios are slightly different. But yeah, we're paying, you can easily pay 30, 40, $50 cost per click for certain search terms here in Australia. To get, 10 of those at 50, you're looking at, $500. And out of one of those, that's not going to be all of your leads. That might just be one lead. So for one lead, you're paying $500. It might take you 10 leads before you get a qualified opportunity, somebody that you think is a good fit in the Google realm right now. And that's where it starts to sting, because if I have to pay for another 10 leads at $500 before I get one qualified matter, then again, you're looking at that $5,000 cost per client for $5,000 back. So you're essentially going to be bleeding money at that point.
100%. Yeah, what we've done is for the low ticket matters, some of them work on Google, at least in America. For like traffic tickets, you can get leads for $5 and sell them at 50, and then upsell them a higher ticket retainer when you're top of mind. You can kind of funnel them that way. But you're right, like ultimately you need these bigger ticket cases, and it comes back to what we were talking about before, which is I want to speak to this specific type of avatar that's had this specific type of problem, and I want to sell them a specific offer. And I think it's so great that we always just come back to these old school marketing principles, which is like, who am I talking to? What am I selling? What is their experience going through my funnel, through my sales experience, and arriving on the other end as a buyer?
I was going to say, it's interesting that you say that, because for the listeners that are watching in, Andrew and I have known each other from previous lives where we've worked together on copywriting and other sort of marketing funnels and strategies. And I actually went back to an initial belief map that you created for me quite a long time ago, because I just feel like there's such a uh, lack of alignment sometimes. If a business or a law firm's doing content, it's just like they're just shooting from the hip. There's no structure around it. They don't know who they're talking to. They don't know like what kind of what stages they're taking a prospect through. What do they need to inform to that prospect to get them to turn into a buying decision. Yeah, I've really found that these belief maps, which we did now probably like 10 years ago or something, are still, again, a fundamental that needs to be built into your day-to-day marketing direction.
Yeah, 100%. And so when it comes to building these offers and choosing who to go after, is it a case of asking the lawyer, okay, what kind of cases do you want to get right now? And then building around that? Or do you kind of deep dive a little bit more and identify, okay, this is worth X value, this is worth Y. I know I can get cases for Z, and then building around that. Kind of how does that alignment of price, economics, and what you know you can get cases for come into play when selecting what to go after?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of the advantages is of kind of niching your agency is that you do get to know things better than other agencies who are just more general, full focus. And that's really the big thing that I say to my clients is that you're coming to me. If you had a Ferrari, you wouldn't be taking your Ferrari down to the Toyota dealership to get it serviced. They might be able to, change spark plugs, change oil, do some of the basics on that car. They don't understand like the nuances that need to be implemented in order to run an effective campaign. And I really think that that's just something that you see from not just seeing one criminal law ad account. It's actually from something you see from 10 different criminal law lawyer accounts and being fully immersed in it. So I think that that obviously feeds into these conversations. I think pricing and actually knowing the numbers of what's possible to know what you can go after. There's always nuances where maybe some person's team might be, A grade closers and they throw in some metrics into that equation that makes something work. But yeah, in general, the price of the ticket, um, and I think just in general these days is kind of saying like, say from a personal injury law firm example, there's certain point systems that can get applied to basically diagnose that injury. And so these are the things that you can start talking towards in the ads as well, saying, well, if I want somebody with the spinal issue or, a shoulder issue or something like that, I can start to speak more specifically to it. So again, it just cuts through to that ideal prospect to say, hey, wait a second, that's exactly what I'm going through right now versus a general personal injury law firm ad that just says, "Hey, speak to us about your injury, no win, no fee." It just there's no specifics to it that forces that high end prospect to say, "Yeah, I'm a Ferrari. I want to take it to the law firm that feels like a Ferrari for my specific injuries." I think with criminal law, I think there's a lot of opportunities there. I mean, I'm still seeing examples where like content on your website can work really well, and I think that if you put enough content on your website that starts to get AI searches pointed towards you and starts to get some Google Ads traction, essentially you're doing this kind of upfront work to then passively achieve lead gen down the track. And I think that that kind of brings into um, you know, all of these like kind of lower ticket items and so forth, that might actually be a better scenario for them to say, hey, we don't want to pay or have that cost associated with acquiring that type of client, but we're still interested in bringing it towards us. I think Google My Business is a great one too, where it's perhaps if you get to the holy ground of being, you know, added into the local pack, yeah, into the map pack. I mean, that's probably the cheapest lead gen you might ever have in your entire existence, I think. So I think that, yeah, there's so many different areas. When it comes to paid ads, it is more of a statistical numbers game where it does have to work out, and you should have that actually aligned and identified before you start advertising rather than just, again, shooting from the hips. And then 6 months, you're like, well, yeah, actually, the numbers never aligned in the first place. And we've kind of been wasting our time, to date.
Yeah, 100%. I often tell lawyers if you get in the maps pack for like a big city like Dallas or Atlanta, you're gonna need to hire a whole team to deal with that because they can expect so many leads. If you hit a big metro for the maps pack, that's the best you can do with lead gen per cost invested to get there is the best you can do. And like we've covered so much with how to make decisions, what decisions to make. And I think it's funny that these days there's so much hype around AI. Like AI can replace your marketing agency and AI can do X, Y, and Z. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, what we're talking about is these high level decisions and how to steer things. And I've kind of seen from my own experience when you know more about a practice area or an area of law, you're able to make better ads and better decisions. And kind of what's your view on that expertise and how it feeds the campaigns in this modern world that everyone's kind of chasing the AI train?
Yeah. Yeah, so the AI train's interesting. So, I mean that conversation has definitely increased a lot between my clients, where they're saying we are actually receiving some AI leads. But I would say, perhaps over a month, depending on size and scale of their online presence, you're probably looking anywhere between like 2 to 10 leads at our scale here in Australia. Um, so we're not talking significant numbers yet, but what we are seeing is like some very it's like I've given all of this information to Claude on my business, on my legal case, on the nuances of this, shareholders agreement or whatever it might be. Can you take all of that information now and then go out and find me, the ideal lawyer to be able to handle that? So we're seeing these incredible searches that you would just never see in Google anymore. Like you Google is just like, show me the best litigation lawyer in Melbourne. Oh, there it is. There's a list, and you've got to go through it. So yeah, like an increasing amount of sophistication when it comes to the prompts being used to actually find. So I've recently got some Claude, ChatGPT leads, and I feel like the quality's been quite good. The conversations that I've had have been very good. Good opportunity value with these conversations. I feel like it is a good source, but I just feel like the volume there at the moment is not quite there. And as you say, if you were to get into the local pack, or if you were to do paid ads for a month, even on a modest budget, I think the amount of leads that you could get would be significantly higher, So I think we have to be careful at the moment. Even yesterday, I thought to myself, you can spend a lot of time with AI to the point where you're almost just pushing buttons. It feels a little bit like the pokies sometimes, or the slot machines, where you're just like, oh, just do it again, do it again, do it again. Like, surely I probably could have done something more beneficial with my time here. So I think it's the bright, shiny object. It's got value, but how far that's going to go and compared to sort of traditional proven channels, say like a Google My Business, it's hard to say at this point.
No, yeah, 100%. I think that is, you nailed it with that. And ultimately, it sounds like one of the core drivers of what you do for clients is video. So I kind of want to double click a little bit more into that. And because I have my own kind of struggles trying to get lawyers on camera to do video for SEO. Some of them have these big teams that come out to the office, they pay 20 grand, 30 grand for social media content, which I then repurpose. How have you kind of coaxed them into producing the video that you need? And then, whether we cover this in this question or the next, kind of what videos are you seeing to work right now, and how do you get that out of them? How do you get the best content out of them for
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So I did have a lawyer say to me one time, Byron, we're not actors at the end of the day. And I kind of take pride in taking ordinary, everyday people through this video process, because I think that video is just such a powerful technique. If you think about it from a 24/7 opportunity to be able to sell and have conversations with different prospects, it's far stronger than your website copy, or anything like that, in my opinion, where someone can literally binge watch 20 to 30 videos of you and come up to speed at a very fast rate. I just think that is such a powerful thing. um, but we just see at the moment, again, like if you look at all these big lawyers, there's a lot of big lawyers, big brand names, everybody knows them. um, and to compete with them, you're going to need like $100,000, $200,000 budgets at the end of the day. Like you just can't go head to head with them anymore. But what those bigger lawyers aren't always good at is kind of coming down to that level of video as well. They're probably still in their traditional stuff, saturating the market, dominating billboards and Google ads and all that kind of stuff. So as a low to mid tier kind of law firm, you've actually got a real opportunity there for somebody to connect with you as a person, stare at you in the whites of the eyes, really start to build trust about the advice and experience that you're providing to them. So, when that person needs it, whether that's at the time or down the track, they've automatically kind of got that connection there with a human versus just a brand, a faceless brand to some degree, and I think that that's just super powerful right now, um, to get good prospects at a lower cost and not needing that six-figure budget that you might have needed in the past to go and compete against some of these guys.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. Like the smaller firms, even the solos, they can move a lot more. They're a lot more agile. They're a lot more open to do this, make this kind of video, especially the younger guys and girls. They're able to be more, they can create video. I think that's the opportunity right now for these firms is creating this video and starting to get that out into the ecosystem so they can be discovered on search and then repurposing a lot of this video content on ads as well. So what kind of ads do you see working right now with on Meta? Is it more text-based, video-based?
Yes. So we've done. So I mean, typical image ads can still work really well, and I think they're a low hanging fruit. You can test messaging really fast, and I definitely recommend trying it. When it comes to image ads, we feel like they don't have to be the sexiest thing. Sometimes your Hormozy style text driven ads where you're just calling out a certain avatar and a certain type of injury, or calling out a specific individual from criminal law matter, for example. Those can work really well, get you up and running, get those leads coming through as quickly as possible. When it comes to videos, I still think that there's educational. So if you build trust with a prospect and give them value that perhaps they haven't been able to find or see easily on other platforms, I think the specificness of it as well. So we have found in personal injury, there's different stages of personal injury. And at certain points, they may have interactions with, say, like work cover or something like that, using language that relates to the stages that they're at. Again, it's kind of, you know, um, just kind of that stage of awareness. Are they problem aware? Are they solution aware? And so forth. And so using the right language can really help align with the qualification of that lead as well. So you can sometimes get a more qualified lead by positioning at different stages of awareness and different stages of where they're at throughout that life cycle. Um, so yeah, things like that I think are really important. We're also finding just standard like text. We call them text video ads, where it's like just text that's kind of like captions on a video that are just talking through on a certain message, and we put overlays or graphics and things like that with it. And we found that that can be really effective as well. And then further than that, your standard sort of marketing funnel with VSLs, video sales letters, where essentially it's your opportunity to for a lawyer, often you jump on a call with a lawyer and say, well, what's the process that you walk a prospect through? And they'll give you a really good spiel of kind of what they say, who they say it to, who's a good fit, who's not a good fit. And this is perfect content for a VSL to essentially help, qualify your leads a little bit more. So again, making sure that they've all watched and understood and can get an understanding if they're a good fit for this lawyer um, before booking a call or submitting their details, etc.
Got you. And for criminal defense specifically, are there any nuances with that or anything you've seen to work kind of particularly well?
I think with criminal, especially with something like meta ads, probably even with organic social as well, you're going to get leads. You're going to get a lot of leads most likely, and the cost per lead is going to be very cheap. So the bigger concern you have is around the qualified rate. It's really understanding how many of those leads that are coming through are actually qualified. And starting to train the algorithm on like this is what a qualified prospect looks like to us. Because yeah, otherwise you'll probably get overwhelmed by a lot of low level matters that aren't going to be a good fit. So yeah, I would say think about your ideal matter, be very specific towards that prospect, explain to them why they would be a good fit to work with a law firm like you, aka you're in this position, and this position. If you have all of those three, you're typically a good fit for us to be having a conversation with you. And then just qualify them and start to train the algorithm, give it the feedback that it needs to say that, hey, this was a good lead, this was not a good lead. Go out and find me more of those good leads. that's inevitably what you're trying to do. It's like training a puppy to some degree. You want to make sure you train it on the right actions rather than let it go rampant, ripping up pillows in your lounge room.
Oh, for sure. That's good insight. And then when they come through the ad on the follow-up side, what does that look like? Is it SMS as well as voicemail and email, and how do you nurture a new lead to a buyer?
Yeah, great question. So there's a lot of different ways, and it really comes down to the actual law firm itself. I had a law firm in the US, actually in Miami, in personal injury, which he talked about a 3-2-1 method, which was essentially calling that prospect 3 times in the first day: morning, noon, afternoon, two the next day, and one the day after that. So that was his approach for connecting as quickly as possible and making sure that, I guess that they got to that prospect before any other clients did. A lot of businesses aren't necessarily set up for that, especially those low and mid-tier firms. So we liked booked consults. We feel like booked consultations are um, a more sophisticated lead. It's got better buying intent and so forth. So if you're not available like within 5 minutes, just trying to get that lead booked into perhaps a 15-minute call. It doesn't have to be via Zoom. It could be a phone call or something like that where you and the prospect has opportunity to connect. And then, thirdly, there's a lot of like sort of SMS related kind of tools as well, where you can start to engage with that prospect, maybe a combination of AI and SMS to get some of that early information and get that prospect, again, just linked into a time to have a conversation with them. So those are probably the three. We definitely get, a large number of our law firms also using offshore as well. So they might have some sort of offshore call center that is there to call as quickly as possible. So I think as you're going more into that mid-tier, higher level of sophistication, areas like that are typically a lot more common.
Got you. Okay, book consult. So like a 15-minute, book them into Calendly, something like that, and then the lawyer calls them back, or is it the intake team?
Yeah. So normally with your lawyer, sometimes lawyers are against, Zoom calls or things like that. They want to be able to fire off quickly, but um, you know, I would say that it's booked in. You can have some alerts and SMS notifications to say, hey, we've got you locked in for this time. We're going to be calling you. Then maybe an hour before, you could send them another reminder saying, hey, we're going to give you a call in an hour, maybe even 5 minutes before, just to give you enough reminders there to be able to get in touch with that prospect and have them ready when you do call them to have that conversation with you. Half the time with prospects these days, it's just, especially in Australia, nobody's answering their phones anymore. I'm not sure if this is the same problem in the US. I don't think it's as severe as what it is here in Australia, but we have a big issue where people just don't answer their calls anymore. And so getting in touch is kind of half the battle with prospects. So,
Yeah, 100%. Okay, sounds good. And I think just to close out, what I would love is just a high level summary of your whole system. So, what does it look like traffic to nurture to buyer? So, when a law firm comes on board with you, what do you build and how does that look to the buyer, and both the buyer and then what the business owner has as a result of your system in place?
yep. Yeah, that makes sense. So at the end of the day, so we're trying to identify like who are they going to be targeting? What are the specifics of that? Outside of that, we're building an offer and creative that's going to speak very specifically to that law firm. The lawyer will generally be the one that records the ads. Sometimes we do go, to user-generated content creators or others to create that content for us. But they'll record it for us. We'll edit it up into something that looks a lot more sophisticated, that looks more polished. Even if our lawyers are kind of sitting in a very basic room with a very basic background, we're able to like tweak and adjust and put that together. And so really the initial combination is going to be, a combination of images and videos that are the first part of the marketing campaign, really identifying like what messaging is resonating here, which leads are opting in, what are our costs, what are our initial costs and so forth. And from that point, we start to get feedback from our law firm straight away. So we start to say, did the lead engage? Did they get in touch? Did the prospect book a call? Were they qualified? And so forth. So we're getting all the key metrics, including like what that potential matter is worth to them over the lifetime value. And from there, we start to pull all that information into what we call our HQ. And HQ is really where you get the visual element. And this is what we find a lot of our clients really love, is that they can look at it from a month to month and see how much they've spent, what was the, how many engaged leads did they get, what was the percentage of those that were qualified, what was the opportunity value, and how much was actually closed and came out the other side of it. And those are really starting to formulate our conversations as well, in terms of, we're starting to use that information to formulate the next step, whether it's like if we've got a lot of leads coming in but none of them are engaging, that's probably a creative issue. If we've got them engaging and they're qualified but they're not getting closed on the other side of it, then that's typically like an intake related issue, and that's something we need to look at with the firm as well. So that's becoming our constraint finder that we're using every single month to start to alleviate the roadblocks to get to the point where, again, they can buy their growth. So to the prospect, in its simplest, it's going to look like a video that pops up in their feed with a human face, what we call a talking head style video. They're going to listen to the message, resonate with it, and then qualify and potentially book themselves in. Now, the extra step that you can add in there is that they'll see the video, they'll go to a longer form video where they can get more information and be more pre-sold, and then qualify and then book in, for example. So there's different pathways to take with this kind of system. And I think you touched on it before about, spending $30,000 on a video crew is a massive chunk of money for a potential piece of creative that might not be effective. So you might advertise that piece of creative for a week. People say, hey, this looks like an ad. I'm not going to engage with it. It's not for me. You've got a dead weight there for 30 grand. I'd rather see you have 10 different lawyers within your law firm, each record the same script, and test that on a budget of 5K and see which face resonates, what was the piece of messaging that resonates, and that's going to give you much better firepower to make decisions. If at some point you decide, hey, this creative's so good, we could potentially do something more sophisticated with it in terms of having a video production crew come in, great, go and do that. But I'd say always do it off the back of data first, rather than spend your cash flow and waste it on a dead weight that's going to sit there and have no impact for you.
No, 100%. Yeah, great insight, man. So thank you for coming on. And where can people reach you?
So pixelrush.io is our website. Feel free to jump on, have a look. You'll see some of our videos up there as well, just in case you want to get a flavor of how we do things. If you want to chat, feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to jump on calls, just speak, give value. If it turns into an opportunity down the track, fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Thank you.